Okay, thank you, Robin, for the introduction and for the invitation to explore a set of records that I had not dealt with before. I've learned a lot in the process. We are talking about roads. We are not talking about interstate highways. The road you see in the picture on the screen at the moment is in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. And this is probably the kind of road we're talking about for the early days of Centre County. Our agenda today has a lot of detail in it. There are road petitions. What are they? What are they good for? How can we use them for genealogy and local history? There are records produced in the process of petitioning for a road. That includes loose papers, that is to say, original documents not bound in books, but stored in folders. And there are the docket books of the Court of Quarter Sessions, which oversaw the process of petitioning to open a road. It's very important, and we'll talk at some length about it, to understand time and place. Centre County today is not the Centre County it was in the early 1800s, which is the focus of the talk. Boundaries have changed, township lines have moved around, and so you do not want to get stuck in your research project by a misunderstanding of what was happening at the time and in the place of interest. We'll do a case study for a petition to open a road between Riddles Mill and Duncan's Mill. We'll find out possibly where those are later. We will talk about using the court docket books as a finding aid to the loose papers. And in particular, we will spend some considerable time talking about how to access the quarter session dockets and indexes online through the Centre County government website, webia or webia, which is the Web Information Access System. And then after a short review, I will put up a slide with references to things I've mentioned along the way, and there should be some time for questions at the end. I do want to say that I am not an expert on all aspects of road petitions, even in Centre County, even in the early 1800s, unless you define an expert as somebody who has already made some mistakes and would recognize them if he made them again. But I have learned a lot, and I want to share that with you today. And I want to say thanks to Justin Hauser in particular for guiding me to the docket books and as a great resource for not only road petitions, but many other things. This talk is based mainly on my exploration of the 1801 and 1811 petitions that are in the collection at the Pennsylvania Room in Bellefonte. These are the loose papers, and the Court of Quarter Sessions docket books, which have been scanned and are available online. And the focus again is Centre County as it was then, not now. Of course, that leaves lots of things that we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about record availability in other Pennsylvania counties, for example, or even in other states. And of course, many things to explore in the docket books that we cannot mention today either. So let's talk about loose papers a bit. As I say, these are unbound original documents. And we'll look at some examples from 1801. This is what they look like in storage at the Pennsylvania Room. Many shelves full of boxes, all labeled as roads. And the box at the top left is roads 1801 to 1830. When you open that box, it looks like this. It's a bunch of file folders, one for each calendar year. If you open the folder for 1801 and begin to look through the documents that are stored there, you can find an example here of a petition with a few signatures on it. This is to open a road from Brush Valley to Penns Valley, and it is from inhabitants of Potters and Haynes townships. And spelling back in the early 1800s was not standardized at all, so you're going to see all kinds of variations in people's names or place names. The petitions, this one is signed by 5 individuals: George Woods, Andrew Gregg, William Early, Conrad Young, and James Duncan. Another fragment in this 1801 folder is a piece of a map, or what is formally called a plat. These are old, unique, and fragile documents. You need to handle them with care to make sure that they do not further deteriorate or break apart. On this map, you will notice some line segments from going from the left over to the right and then turning upwards with a house marked at the end of a path. That is the road as laid out by the viewers of the road. And along that path are notations that indicate the course or compass direction and the distance along each line segment or piece of the road, measured in perches. A perch is a unit of length. It is 16.5 feet. There are 320 perches in a statute mile. You'll also notice a squiggly line along the bottom, which is Fishing Creek. Well, that's in Clinton County today, but back in 1801, that part of Clinton County was actually a piece of Centre County, and that's why we find this particular map of a road in the Centre County records. Here's another piece of that same large plat. It extends over 3 sheets. It has notations on it for Brush Valley at the lower left and Sugar Valley at the upper right. Sugar Valley, again, is in Clinton County now. The courses and the distances are shown along the road, along with improvements, that is to say, structures created by human beings, and also natural features such as mountain ridges and streamlines and so forth. Here's another petition from 1801, which has lots more signatures on it. This is from sundry inhabitants of Centre Township. Well, Centre Township no longer exists in Centre County, although there are 4 Centre Townships in other counties of the state of Pennsylvania. This points out the necessity for a public road to be laid out from William Tipton's storehouse to John Miller's and Crow's mill. And there's always some concern about reading this old handwriting correctly. Now, for the names beneath, I have not tried to read every single name, but I've noted the surnames of a number of individuals, some of whom you may recognize as characteristic Centre County names: Askin, Gonzalez, Leathers, Lucas, Neff, Livingston, McCalman or McCalmont, Mitchell, Lamb, and so on. And no, I don't expect you to read the names on these slides. Let's talk a little bit more about signatures. I have to put up the signature of my great-great-great-grandfather, Daniel Wade. This is not a road petition from Centre County. This is a signature of Daniel Wade in an administrator's bond book in Frederick County, Virginia. So you can find signatures in all kinds of places. This one is a bond for the administrator of the estate of James Gothrop. James Gothrop's daughters, 3 of them, married people named Jacob Jenkins, Daniel Wade, and Jacob Taylor, among others. And those 3 brothers-in-law all signed on as sureties on this bond. What's distinctive in the case of Daniel Wade's signature are the capital D and the capital W. Lots of curlicues. And I think it would be pretty straightforward to recognize that same signature if you found it on another document. Likewise, Jacob Taylor and Jacob Jenkins wrote their capital J's quite differently. So a signature is a mark of individuality and identity. Here's another signature. If you are not used to reading German handwriting, you might have a little trouble recognizing the name Konrad Herzog. This is written in Kurrentschrift in a county deed book from 1784 in Washington County, Pennsylvania. It is either an actual signature by Conrad, or more likely a facsimile of his signature created by the clerk who recorded the deed. The cloudy seal of approval on the right-hand side is an indication that this person did actually sign his name on a document. It is not a mark. Okay, the question for us in terms of using signatures for research is whether this Conrad Herzog in Washington County, 1784, is the same Conrad Herzog that appears in Centre County records in the early 1800s. And the interesting thing is that both of these Conrad Herzogs or Hartzogs had sons named Henry. So that's a suggestion that they might in fact be the same person. But if we go to road petitions in Centre County in 1801, and I stumbled across this by accident, we can find the marks of Conrad Herzog, that's the bottom signature on the top panel, and Henry Herzog, the signature in the bottom panel, on a petition by inhabitants of Patton Township to annex part of Warrior Mark Township. That again is a township that no longer exists in Centre County. It became Half Moon Township, basically. So do we think that someone who could sign his name in 1784 would be signing a petition in 1801 using a mark rather than his actual signature? That's a pretty strong indication that these are two distinct individuals. And yes, you could have found that out by looking at tax lists or perhaps census records or other indications rather than going by signatures in road petitions. But sometimes that's your own best and only way of settling a question for sure. So aside from marks or signatures to compare from one document to another, what are some other genealogical uses for petitions? Obviously, they locate an individual in place and time. If someone claims to be an inhabitant of Patton Township in 1801, then you assume that that information is correct unless you find something to contradict it. You use what you find in road petitions as evidence to corroborate or refute other evidence that you are assembling to answer a research question. You may find on petitions names that do not appear on early census or tax lists, because remember, those documents refer only to the head of household or to the taxpayer in the early years of the 1800s in Pennsylvania. So there might be younger adult members of a household who do not appear on those lists, but who nevertheless signed on to a petition. And if we were to go backwards and look again at this 1801 petition from Patton Township, we see the names Peter Gray, his mark, John Gray, his mark, and Peter Gray Jr., his mark. These are all neighbors of Conrad and Henry Herzog. And in particular, we know from other evidence that John Gray was Conrad Herzog's son-in-law. So the clustering of names on a petition includes probably names that do not appear elsewhere on the census record and represent part of Conrad Herzog's fan club, friends, associates, and neighbors. People who signed the same petition probably lived as neighbors, or at least came together at the market or the church or the courthouse. They possibly migrated to Centre County together. They possibly intermarried, as in the case of Herzog and Gray. You certainly get practice in reading old handwriting, which is always a benefit. And in particular with road petitions, you get the same words, phrases, and sentences repeated multiple times in different handwriting between the petitions, the orders of the court, the returns of the viewers, and so on. And so you have a chance to compare the same sentence as written by different people and get used to the peculiarities of old handwriting. And of course, if you are into mapping of any kind, such as using metes and bounds to outline a tract of land, you can use those same tools on the courses and distances for a road as it is laid out. Courses, again, being the word for compass direction here. And if you combine that information with what is written or shown on the plat, it may allow you to locate precisely where a person's dwelling was. There are drawbacks, of course, because road petitions are not an every name source, nor do they even name every household in a particular area at a particular time. They are not indexed. At least the loose papers are not. No one has gone through and transcribed all the names for you to look up very conveniently. It involves some digging. And of course, there is no guarantee that you will find what you think might be there. The docket book indexes do indicate a personal name at one end or the other, or both ends of a petitioned road. For example, from Riddles Mill to Duncan's Mill, as we will talk about. The docket entries, the more extensive notations that the index points to, will name the viewers of the road appointed by the court, and it will mention persons who live along the road if the viewers decided that that was a significant feature to draw attention to. But the petitioners will not be listed in the docket books as such. So petitions do not provide direct evidence of family relationships or ages or things like that. There is certainly indirect evidence based on the clustering of names or on localizing where the petitioners and the viewers are from at a particular time. Aside from genealogy narrowly conceived, petitions can be used for local history. They mention facilities, for example, mills and furnaces, places that people might want to get to, other roads that people might want to connect to so that they can take their wares to a distant market. So it's an indication of what the people of the time thought were important destinations. Was it important to get to church? Was it important to get to the courthouse? Was it important to get to a marketplace? Was it important to get your grain to the mill so that it could be turned into flour? Was it important to get the ore or the charcoal to the furnace as you were clearing your land or mining? This is all about commerce. Certainly, petitions provide evidence of community, people getting together to petition their government for some product or process that was for the common good. Petitions also show that sometimes there were disputes among neighbors as to where a road might go. After all, if someone opens up a public road across your property, you have lost the use of that land for any other purpose, such as raising crops, pasturing. You cannot put a fence across a public road, and so on. And so there are losses as well as things to be gained when a road is opened. You can discuss how the road network developed over time and became denser and more suitable for the needs of the community. You can also, because the township petitions are mixed in with the road petitions, find the reasons why township lines got changed over the course of time. And a good reference for all of these kinds of things is John Blair Lynn's History of Centre and Clinton Counties, which does a pretty good job of summarizing things in the early days of Centre County. So what was the process of petitioning and getting a road opened? These road petitions were under the jurisdiction of the Court of Quarter Sessions, which met quarterly or almost quarterly, January, April, August, and November being the typical session terms. When a petition was presented to the court, usually on the same day, the justices of the peace who were performing as a court of quarter sessions would order a view of the road. That is to say, they would appoint 6 men, and it was men at the time, including one attorney, to make sure that the law was adhered to go out on the ground, view the proposed road, decide whether there was a need for the road, and lay out a course that was most convenient and did the least injury to the landowners along the road. They would then return a report to the court at a future session, and after due consideration, the court would then issue an order to open the road, or perhaps if there was a protest, in order to review the road with a different set of viewers, or even to re-review a road, or to vacate an existing road, or to pay damages to a landowner who lost some economic value when the road was opened. So a simple road case would continue over several sessions of court. The loose papers for those documents, the petition, the orders, the return, and so on, are likely grouped together into a single folder, but you might find them spread over folders for preceding and subsequent years. So it always pays to turn the page, as they say, and look on adjacent in adjacent groups of documents. A more complicated case might continue for years because the first viewers decided the road wasn't necessary. There was a new petition, a new set of viewers appointed. Maybe that set of viewers failed to take action and was discharged and replaced with a different set of viewers. And so a case might drag on for several years until it was finally resolved. And the docket books, or simply exploring in multiple folders for calendar years in the loose papers, will usually reveal that. Context is everything. You put a mill on a stream because you are using water power to turn the mill wheel. You want water for other purposes, and so water courses are important in determining where structures were built. Other topography is important as well: mountains, valleys, ridges, where was the ore, where were the forested areas, and so on. And so when you talk about roads, you are talking about connecting points of interest, destinations and origins, likely where structures were built. So understanding the lay of the land is important, but also understanding the artificial jurisdictional boundaries is important. Before Centre was created as a county, there were already people and roads in the region. Otherwise, there would not have been a need to set up a new county with a new courthouse and tax collectors and so on, after all. That means that the petitions for earlier roads, pre-1800, are going to be filed in somebody else's courthouse. Centre also lost territory to Clinton County when it was formed in 1839, and so some petitions that you find in Centre County records are going to refer to roads and land that are now in Clinton County. Something else you need to bear in mind is that for a period of time from 1804 to 1815 in the case of McKean, or 1804 to 1822 in the case of Clearfield counties, Centre County courts had jurisdiction because those counties had not yet set up their local government system completely. And so petitions for roads or other matters in those time periods for those places are with the Centre County records, because it was the Centre County Court of Quarter Sessions that oversaw them. Township lines changed a lot in the early days. Townships got renamed. New townships were formed over time. And so if you think that a reference to Haines Township refers to the Haines Township of today, rather than the Haines Township of, say, 1801 or 1811, then you might be in for a surprise. So let's review that a little bit. Here is a map from Raymond Bell's book, Mother Cumberland, that shows that in 1770, what is now Centre County was then part of Cumberland County, which had a much larger area than Cumberland County has today. Because by 1790, Cumberland had been divided into 5 different counties: a small residue Cumberland County, Franklin County, Bedford, Huntington, and Mifflin counties. In that little inset map, those counties are outlined. And then on the larger map, you can see that what was Then part of Mifflin County, the part that became part of Centre, included only two townships, Upper Bald Eagle and Potters Township. Additional area for Centre County came from Northumberland County, that would be Haines and Lower Bald Eagle. Lower Bald Eagle was for a time part of Lycoming County. And then what is now roughly Half Moon and Ferguson Townships at the southwest part of Centre County came from Huntington County and Franklin Township. But even within a 10-year period from 1790 to 1800, there was already further subdivision of townships. This now shows the outline of Centre County, which was formed in February 1800, which included a township Warriors Mark, a township Patton, a township Centre, and a township Miles that were not there 10 years earlier. So Haines in 1790 was bigger than Haines in 1800. Patton did not exist in 1790, and so on. So understanding the context of where the boundaries were at the time of interest is absolutely key. Here's another series of maps beginning in 1800. These maps were made by Charles Snyder. This is showing Half Moon and Patton, very different from what they are today. There's a Centre Township, there's an Upper Bald Eagle Township, and Potter Township. By 1810, we have Walker and Howard Township replacing Centre. Upper Bald Eagle has changed its name to Spring. Ferguson Township has been created at the expense of Half Moon and Patton. And so again, you need to understand sort of year by year how these lines are shifting around. And Lynn's history is a good resource to learn those things. In 1820, we have even more counties, townships, Boggs, Rush, and Bald Eagle, Lamar, and Logan, which later became part of Clinton County, but were townships in Centre County in 1820. So with that sobering thought in mind, let's look at a case study from 1811. I stumbled across this one in viewing the loose papers at the Pennsylvania Room. These include the petition itself, dated August 28th, 1811, which has signatures on it. It includes the court's order to view the road, issued on the same day. On the reverse side of that order is the court's confirmation to open the road nisi, which means provisionally, which order was issued in the November session of the court, and then confirmed absolutely after there was no objection for a period of time in July 1812. The return of the viewers is another loose page, an original document with signatures, and there is a plat showing the road in the form of a map with reference to improvements along the road. So let's look at these documents. Here's the petition, and it begins with some formal legalese, very polite, to the Honorable Jonathan Walker, Esquire, President and his associate judges, blah, 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 at a court of general quarter sessions of the peace, now holding at Bellefonte, 28th day of August, the petition of inhabitants of Haines and Potters Townships for a road. Well, if you had a present idea of Haines and Potters Township in mind, you would have a puzzle right here because they are not adjacent townships. They are separated by Gregg and Penn Townships. But in 1811, it was perfectly reasonable for inhabitants of these two places to join together in writing a petition for a road because those townships did share a common border at the time. Your petitioners labor under great inconveniences for want of a road or cartway to lead from Riddles Mill in Haines Township to intersect the Great Road at or near Duncan's Mill on Penns Creek. And so here's a reference to a road already in existence and wanting to open a new road to connect with it. 5 people signed this petition: William Long, L. Messina, John Dauberman, Andrew Gregg, and a name written in German, which I will not attempt to translate for you at this time. The court received the petition and issued this order to review. At the top left of the document is the place for the seal of the county or the court. And this is written out by the clerk of court, William Petrican. It says, among other things, it rehearses the petition itself, repeats the same wording in the same way, presented to the court, want of a road, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the bottom is the court's action, whereupon the court appoints 6 people: James Cook, Philip Musser, Abraham Ream, John Williman, Jacob Henning or Herring, Esquire, he's the attorney on the case, and Ludwig Rischel, to view the road proposed, the ground proposed for the said road. And if they agree that there is occasion for such a road, they are to lay out the same and to make report thereof to November sessions next, with a plat or draft thereof, with the courses and distances, and with reference to the improvements through which the same may pass. So that's very formal language, but the key point is that it names the 6 men who will view the situation and lay out the road. The viewers returned their report to court, and a couple of segments of that page-long report are shown here. We, the subscribers, unanimously agreed there is occasion for such a road. We laid out the same in the following manner: beginning at said Riddles Mill, through a lane north 26 degrees east, 12.5 perches, and so on, through many twists and turns. Thence through corners of fields of Archibald Allison, into the great road leading from Aaronsburg to Archibald Allison's Tavern. Thence along that same road, north 86 degrees east, 17.5 perches, into the great road leading from Aaronsburg to Duncan's Mill. So here we have the courses and distances written out in longhand, and with reference to features along the road, in this case, Archibald Allison's Tavern and his fields, that might be the clues you are looking for to understand some particular genealogical or local history problem. Here are the signatures of the viewers on their return. Ludwig Rischel made his mark. John Williman, below that, Philip Moser, Jacob Herring, it looks like, and James Cook. And then the one in the third one down is Abraham Ream. And this again is written in German handwriting. If you did not know beforehand that Abraham Ream had Germanic ancestry, you would find that out by looking at how he signed his name. Here's that plat or the chart of the roadway. In this case, it actually has been hand colored to show Penn's Creek in blue, leading from Riddles Mill over here on the left. The road goes up past some fields, along the edge of the fields, through the woods, making its twists and turns as it goes, and passing through by William Lang's house, and then past the house and barn of Archibald Allison, and then down to Archibald Allison's house here, or tavern, at the bridge on the road leading to Aaronsburg, and then further down to the mill dam at Duncan's Mill. And so this is a way of representing the map as a picture rather than in words, or the road as a picture rather than in words. So all of these are loose documents found in the folder for 1811. Well, where is that road exactly? Are there enough clues given that you can locate that road? Well, it might take some work. In this case, you want to refer to existing maps as much as possible. The earlier maps are, of course, closer in time to the event in question, which is this petition and order for a road, and therefore might be more relevant if it shows landowners or features like mills or furnaces. But the early maps are often somewhat sketchy in terms of their accuracy. They were perhaps compiled in Philadelphia by someone who never set foot in Centre County and is just using paper records for the purpose. The later maps are more likely to be accurate in terms of directions and distances, but are more remote in time. So some of the famous maps include the Mellish Whiteside maps. These, I think, are the earliest detailed maps of most places in the state of Pennsylvania. They are found at the Pennsylvania State Archives website. There is Tilden's Great Wall chart of the Centre County with many of the landowners or tenants mentioned. There is Pomeroy's Atlas from 1874, and an interesting feature of that one is that distances along roads between intersections are noted in perches. That's very convenient for our purpose. There is also an interesting map which does not show any roads on it, only the watercourses, the ridges and valleys, other geographic features, and the towns. And that might be helpful in getting rid of the modern clutter that prevents you from seeing the lay of the land or identifying a particular creek or stream that might be mentioned in the petition or the viewer's return. It's good to bear in mind that new roads usually follow the old roads. There is only one good way to get from Potter's Mills over the Seven Mountains to Milroy, and that is through the gap that has been there from time immemorial and which was used 200 years ago and is in use today. But as anybody who has driven on Route 322 in the last few years on that part of the road is well aware, the alignments do change with time a little bit. We now have a brand spanking new chunk of road built at great expense connecting Potter's Mills on the one side with and going up to over Center Mountain, Seven Mountains. Old county road maps are therefore useful because the modern-ish alignments of county roads is likely to be similar to where the old roads that we see in these petitions are mentioned. And PennDOT has a number of older maps, including a 1931 map for Centre County. So together with the maps, you want to use all the context you have, all of what you already know, such as where the township boundaries were, in an attempt to match up the shape and length of the road from the given courses and distances with plausible starting and end points to see, does it make sense that there would be a road here? And as a last resort, you might start with a guess as to some modern tract of land that lies along the road and do deed research going backwards in time until you find, you hope, a mention of the landowners at that time or the improvements that are referred to in the viewer's report. So let's look at some of those maps just as an example to get some familiarity with them. This is a piece of the Mellish Whiteside map around Spring Mills, and you'll notice Egg Hill here is the feature. Penns Creek runs from upper left over toward the right. This pink line going from upper left to Spring Mills and then more vertically downward to the bottom edge is the boundary line between Haines Township on the right and Potter Township on the left. And so we are talking about Riddles Mill being in Haines Township. Well, that means it's on the north side of Penns Creek, apparently, or at least the road that we're talking about will be on the north side of Penns Creek. if this is the right place for it. Here's the name Duncan. That's a clue that we are looking in the right place. We know we should be on Penns Creek somewhere. And so maybe this part of the road, some piece of it, includes the road that was petitioned in 1811. So some structures are marked here, a church and cook's house or tavern. You'll notice also this map is not perfect. Whoever made it got Sinking Creek and Muddy Run confused at least once and has crossed out and rewritten those names on the map. This is the Pomeroy map showing, again, Spring Mills at lower center, Egg Hill at the bottom left, and the roads and an illustration of Penns Creek going from top left down to the bottom right. This map is not oriented so that north is up. You have to look carefully at the full page image to be sure which direction is north. Be aware of that. But the handy thing about the Pomeroy maps is these numbers written along the roads. The red circle here indicates there are 548 perches from the road intersection a little bit to its left down to Spring Mills. And so you have a scale that you can compare with the scale given in the viewer's return or the viewer's plat to see where the road might be. There are some interesting features on here. Here is S Mill. Well, that might be Samuel Mill, but it's more likely to be Saw Mill. And up here at the top left is G Mill. That could be George Mill, but it's more likely Grist Mill. And over on the right-hand side, near the edge, is Cider Mill. And so studying these maps a little bit, understanding what information they contain, what abbreviations they make use of, is going to be important in exploiting them. But here's this sawmill here, and some bumps and wiggles in the road that are kind of reminiscent of that plat that we saw earlier. See, here's the road going along this little thin line with its bumps and wiggles, which might be reflected in this roadway shown on here. All right. Also, a clue are the names shown. W. Allison. Well, that rings a bell, doesn't it? And here we have R.H. Duncan. Now, this is 1874, now more than 60 years after the names mentioned in the 1811 documents. Here's that county road map from 1931, which shows what roads existed at the time. Not every street, not every township road, but certainly every county road. And they might be useful in some purposes for understanding the construction and layout of roads more recently. And here's that map, the stream map that has no roads on it at all, but it does show Spring Mills, Penn Hall, Center Hall, Old Fort, Potter's Mills, and so on, along with Egg Hill and the names of the streams. All right, so that's a case study of a particular one. If you happen to find your ancestor mentioned in that particular case study, congratulations. More likely you did not, and so you would say, how do I find a petition with my ancestor on it, or with my favorite township on it, or my favorite road today on it? How do I begin that process, if such a petition actually exists? And alas, there is no royal road for that process, although there is a royal road in Centre County. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, but having no guarantee that the needle exists. The best you can do, or certainly something you can do, is to improve your odds of finding that needle by making the haystack smaller. Use what you know to locate to a particular range of dates of just a few years if possible, perhaps using tax records or census records to say, my ancestor was at this place at this time in a particular township. And then you can skim through the loose documents more quickly, focusing on just a handful of those folders instead of a whole bookshelf full of boxes full of folders. When you are handling these old, fragile, unique, irreplaceable documents, be careful. Move slowly. Don't get excited and start waving them around. They're going to break. Keep the documents flat as much as possible, fully supported, not draped over the edge of the table where they could get bent or fall to the floor or get smudged. No pens, not even a pencil if you can avoid it, unless you need to take notes on some fresh piece of paper. Don't sort or rearrange the documents in a file so that they make more sense to you. Leave them in the order you find them. Do certainly not mix across folders to collect documents for a particular petition in one place. They are where they are for a reason. If you want to play with the documents and rearrange them, take photographs, rearrange those, play with them as much as you want. And yes, the Pennsylvania Room does collect a small fee for the privilege of using your digital camera to do this work, but it's only a few dollars, well worth the effort. I would take photographs of the front and back of every document in a folder, and I would keep track of which front belongs to which back by photographing some kind of a separating sheet in between each front and back pair so that I know these two camera images belong to one sheet of paper. The next two after this separator belong to a different sheet of paper. I learned that the hard way. I didn't do that for the 1801 group, but by the time I came back to the library to look at the 1811s, I had figured out that little trick. Okay. But you can maybe shortcut the process and instead of plunging directly into the loose papers, consult the docket books of the Court of Quarter Sessions because they summarize the petition and the return of the viewers using the same words as are shown on the loose papers, and they will certainly focus you on the correct year if you can locate the docket book entries corresponding to the road in question. The docket books are indexed and available online through Webia, again for a small fee, but it beats spending gas money to drive to the courthouse. And you won't find the docket books there anyway. They've been put into storage. So let this be your finding aid to go back to the loose papers to look for those signatures, for the actual orders, for added notations on the reverse, and so on. So let's take a few minutes to understand how we can use Webia to find these docket books and their indexes. If you have not used Webia before, it's easy to find. In your favorite browser, search for Webia Centre County, and a top link should probably lead you to this page on the Centre County government website. If you have not formed an account with Webia yet, scroll down the page to create that account. There will be a $10 activation fee, and then you will purchase credits. Each credit basically corresponds to a click of a mouse while you are on their website. And of course, you want to minimize those clicks by doing strategic things. And I would recommend starting with 50 or 200 credits as a purchase. That's if you buy more at a time, you spend fewer pennies per credit, but you don't want to buy so many that you never use them up. Along the top row in the Webia pages is a row of homepage, prothonotary, recorder of deeds, register of wills. Each of these has a different county office. Each of them holds different kinds of records. The prothonotary is also the clerk of court, and so that's where you will find the docket books. On this view of the page, the important part is the notices at the bottom, which refer to new documents being available to view. That prothonotary tab, if you click on it, gives you a drop-down menu, and what we are looking for is called criminal dockets on here, circled in red on your screen. And that opens up a contents page for criminal quarter sessions, Court of Common Pleas criminal. And each of these blue buttons, numbered 1 through 75, leads you to a docket book Which docket book do you want? Well, if you hit that plus button, then you open up a view that shows that docket book 1 contains sessions of court from January 1801 through November 1808, and so on. For 1811, we would be looking in docket book 2 to find records for that road from Riddles Mill to Duncan's Mill. But my examples here will be actually from book 1. So clicking on the blue 1 for docket book 1 gives you this view, 2 parts to it, an upper part with index pages and the lower main body of the book running from page 1 to about page 350. The cool thing about this is that each of these sections highlight are delimited by these narrow blue lines is a chunk which contains up to 20 pages. So in the index section, we can find the index for the petitions and the returns all in one chunk, and we can download that entire 20 pages as for just a couple of mouse clicks. We do not have to download one page at a time. Likewise, down below, we can download pages 61 through 80, although 66 is missing, with just a couple of clicks. So let's see what happens if we click the I button under the index. We come up with page 1 of a 20-page chunk. The I for indictments. This is not the page we care about. We could navigate within webia by using the arrows back and forth or the drop-down menu to pick a particular page. But every time we click, we spend a credit. And so it's better to download that entire 20-page chunk as a PDF file. We do that by going to the printer icon at the top right, circled here. Clicking on that opens up a printer dialog box. And if you click on all and then OK, webia will process all 20 pages and make them ready to print out. And when it's done processing, it will give you your usual browser's printer dialog box. And if you wanted to send it to the printer, you could. But it's much better to save it as a PDF file for later use. So here in Safari, my favorite browser, I would hit the PDF button at the lower left of the screen and continue as usual from there. And then I end up with a quite a large file on my computer at home to play with. What does the Riddles Mill case look like as recorded in docket book 2? Well, in the index, we can find for August sessions 1811, the petitions that were heard at that session of court, including petition for a road from Riddles Mill in Haines Township to intersect the Great Road near Duncan's Mill, and a reference to page 109 in the docket book. Likewise, under the returns of roads in the index for November session, or actually January sessions 1812, it's a little hard to read here because of the color of the ink, but it says return of a road from Riddles Mill to intersect the Great Road, et cetera, referring to page 130. So going to the docket book entries themselves on page 109, we find a short summary, which includes the recital of that petition. You know, they labor under great inconveniences for want of a road or cartway to lead from Riddles Mill in Haines Township to intersect the Great Road at or near Duncan's Mill, blah, blah, blah. And then at the bottom, the action of the court, whereupon the court appoint James Cook, et cetera, to view the ground. So things we saw on that loose paper in the box with the file folders appear in the docket books as entries in the particular term of the court. And in January sessions 1812, we get 2/3 of a page writing out the entire review, a return of the viewers reporting on their laying out of this road with all of the courses and distances, mentioning Allison's Tavern and so on and so on. And again, at the bottom, the court's action, whereupon the court confirmed the same as a public road of breadth 33 feet Well, isn't that interesting? 33 feet is exactly 2 perches. Remember, a perch is 16.5 feet. And ordered that the said road be cut, cleared, opened, and bridged where necessary, and also that the supervisors of the townships are responsible for opening and maintaining this road. What does that mean? It means a new tax burden on the inhabitants of those townships. So there is a trade-off between getting a road opened and having to pay for it. Let's review quickly. What have we covered? We focused on petitions from the early years of Centre County, and we have both loose papers, originals, and docket books to consult. We considered the uses of road and other types of petitions, like township boundary petitions, for genealogical purposes. The example we had was comparing the signatures of Conrad Hartsock in 2 different documents. We considered some limitations on the usefulness of petitions, and they are not the first source you would normally consult, but they do form part of a reasonably exhaustive research effort to answer a specific research question. We considered the use of petitions for local history as an aid to building a story about a community and its development. We learned the several steps in the process, which was overseen by the Court of Quarter Sessions, and the records that were produced in the process, including both the loose original papers, petition, orders, returns, plats, and the docket book entries. We got some inkling that we really do need to understand the context of the place and time that we are investigating, because of so many changes in jurisdictional boundaries and so on. We made a case study for 1811 for a road from Riddles Mill to Duncan's Mill, looking at the loose papers and the hand-colored plat, which is the exception rather than the rule in terms of coloring. We considered some map resources that may help to pin down where the road was and the people who used it, by reference to landowners or tenants that are shown on those old maps. We looked at the problem of finding a petition other than by serendipity with relevant genealogical evidence for us. We reviewed some best practices for handling these old, unique, fragile documents. We used webia to locate the docket book pages, index, and entries to search for possibly relevant petitions at home, much better than scheduling an appointment at the Pennsylvania room and going bleary-eyed trying to read the old handwriting from random sources. We learned that the docket entry books repeat much of the information that is in those loose petition papers. The viewers' names will appear and the courses and distances, but things that you must consult the original documents for are the petitioner's names and the plat. In conclusion, I hope we've discovered in this process that road and other petitions place our ancestors in context with their communities and their concerns. They provide critical evidence concerning identity, presence at a particular place and time, friends, associates, and neighbors, all of which are part of an overall strategy to overcome a brick wall or to add detail, at least, to our knowledge of our ancestors' lives. They do present challenges to work with, but those can be eased by leveraging what we already know about the relevant time period and geographical area. The more detailed that knowledge is, the better, preferably at the township level or even the village level. And Lynn's history can help a lot with that in the early years of Centre County's history. The docket books make searching for the relevant petitions by time and geography much easier. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and show some references while we take questions.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was so informative. So we did have a few questions come in through the chat during the course of your presentation, and participants, if you have more questions, feel free to enter them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. The first I want to address, because I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but I can't remember. If you registered for this session, you will receive the slides and associated resources via email probably this week sometime. So you can expect that that will come through. So Richard, a question for you. And I answered this in the chat, but I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to expand on Mother Cumberland. So someone asked, is there a source that traces the changes in townships in Centre County over time? Do you want to recap what you mentioned for that question?
Sure. Lynn's history is pretty good at describing when townships were created and what their original boundaries were. And so that's a reference that you can easily find on Google Books, for example, and it has been reprinted, and certainly there is a copy or two in the Pennsylvania room to refer to. The maps that I showed by Charles Snyder are published as part of the CD-ROM that Centre County Genealogical Society sells, which shows all of the warrants of Centre County. The reference here on this page is to Snyder Township Maps, reproduced in Wilkins and Bordner editors, warrant map of Centre County. If you go to the Centre County Genealogical Society website, under publications, you can find out about ordering that. A few of those maps have been published from time to time in our newsletter, and I think they also appear in the marriage books at the beginning, just to help set the geographical stage for research that way. So those are very handy. They are pretty accurate, I think. If you really want the view of township boundaries as they were in the late 1800s, the prothonotary page on Webia actually has listed under other books the plat book, but I caution you that that's a very large file to download.
Perfect. And I would just add that in the Pennsylvania room, we do refer folks to the Mother Cumberland title that Richard has shared, and I've dropped both of those citations in the chat. Richard, another question is, what's the difference between a road and cartway?
Fine question. I don't know a technical answer for that or a legal answer. There's a distinction certainly between a right-of-way and a cartway. So for example, the road outside my house has a right-of-way, I think 50 feet side to side. That would include the sidewalks and the grass strip between the sidewalk and the actual cartway, which is the paved part. Now, we're not talking pavement back in the 1800s. We're talking about chopping down trees and clearing boulders, and maybe filling in some ruts or laying down some planks to make the road a little bit smoother. But basically, a cartway has to be wide enough for a wagon.
Thank you. The next question is a matter of practice. Who paid for road construction?
The townships were responsible for bridges and roads. That was taken out of their taxpayers' contributions. The county also levied a tax on unceded lands, that is to say, lands which had been claimed and paid for through the state patenting process, but that had not actually been occupied or improved. They often had out-of-county landowners, and the county thought it was a convenient way to collect revenue by taxing those lands. So if there were a bridge connecting two townships across a creek, for example, both townships would contribute to the construction and maintenance of that bridge. If a road was entirely within one township, that would be the township responsible for the road.
Thank you so much. So I do want to share, and Richard, I'll share these comments with you personally after the presentation, but folks are in the chat thanking you for sharing your expertise, your hard-earned expertise in many cases. Everyone, we want to thank you so much for joining us this morning, but I want to, as the person who's not muted, say, Richard, thank you so much for your time and your enthusiasm and your willingness to explore resources that many of us haven't explored. It is so tremendously appreciated.
Well, you are all welcome, and I thank Robin again for giving me the occasion to dive into this particular set of government records. The docket books are so full of interesting things, and there might be occasion for a future talk about what can be found there.
Wonderful. Well, I'll put that bug in your ear probably next week.
Maybe somebody else can do that, like Justin.
No, you volunteered. Anyway, to that point, everyone, thank you so much for coming. As I mentioned, you will receive an email probably next week sometime that will contain the slides from today along with all the references. And once the recording is ready to be uploaded to YouTube, that link will be sent out as well. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us across many time zones in the United States. And I hope you have a beautiful Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you at a future program again soon. Thank you.